with many signifying the U.S. United States. Happen.
5, 4, 3.
We have stage 2 engine ignition. 1 minute 25 seconds. Change pressure hold. No
Can we have igniters work? And we have chamber ready to rise.
291 4229.
Hey guys, City Wall here, and welcome back to Mars. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to briefly mention something. I know a lot of people really connect to this project, and I think that's in part because I've worked really hard to give the city a story. It's a story that's set in the future, but rooted in reality. I didn't invent the idea that militarized police would terrorize the citizens that they're meant to protect, or that rich people would look down from their ivory towers in disgust, unfazed by the struggles of the people below them. But I think injecting things like this into the story of Mars is what makes this project feel eerily real. Where I live, the past few weeks, war vehicles sold to police have literally been rolling through the streets while rich people throw pool parties in their mansions in the hills, and it's been giving me a sense of dread working in the city, to be honest, feeling like I'm creating an extrapolated version of our own reality. In Mars, police can enter your house and kill you in your bed and pull you aside and choke you out for no reason, or kneel on your neck until you die. And that's not unique to Mars. That happens here too. And it's shameful to see the sheer number of people, especially people with wealth and power, sit idly by knowing full well that this is happening. On Mars and on Earth, people are not created equal. Some are born into situations where they never have to work a day in their lives, while others fear for their lives every time they leave the house, and that's not right. The longer we go before addressing the problems of our reality, the closer and closer we slide towards living in a Mars-like dystopia. So, as someone with a platform to get their voice out there, I just wanted to say that it's your responsibility to make sure that we don't end up living in a place like Mars. It's your responsibility to do everything in your power to make sure that we live in a fair and just world. That means you can't ignore the problems. You have to show up to the protests. You have to donate to organizations that make a difference, and you have to hold people accountable when they say or do things that are just wrong. Because if you don't use your voice, no one will. This is a pretty exciting episode. It's episode 10. So real quick, I just thought I would show you guys a little bit of what's going on. In case you're wondering, we've probably gotten through about a third of the area that's inside of the dome. Things have gotten a little bit quicker to build, so I am building a little bit more in each episode than I was in the first couple episodes. The prop limit, which is the amount of props that you can place down on a map before the game tells you no more props, is around 60,000 total, and that's usually the one that I hit first as opposed to the building or the node and segment limits. And right now I'm sitting around 12 or 13,000 props, which is pretty good, I would say. There's also about 6 or 7,000 procedural objects, so that takes away from that prop number, which is also helpful. The loading time and the FPS is still really good, especially compared to Kobayashi Island, so we're doing well in that regard as well. So things are looking pretty good going forward. This is a pretty exciting episode. We have a guest here in Mars for the first time, Skibitth, who I've been trying to get into Mars forever. It's a dream of mine to have him here, so it's extremely exciting. We also do a little bit more work around the central market, the black market area, and finish off with some experimenting with new assets. So let's jump into it. So the first thing this episode was I came back and did just a bit more of the black market. And we have this area here that has like 4 different conveyor belts coming in and going out of the central sorting exchange, 2 on the upper side and 2 on the lower level. And they're not super like stacked on top of each other. They're a little spread out. And so this area, this like street that comes through here needs to be pretty wide. And so what I decided to do was take the shopping arcade assets by Kaminogi and make 2 really long shopping arcades, which are like basically covered shopping areas. And the props that he made are sort of like to cover the walkway that you would walk down like in between all the shops, and all the shops are supposed to be on the left and right. And so to cover those up, I used this sort of like metal awning cover thing, and I used procedural objects just to line up the posts from that metal awning thing to the shopping arcade so that they were really similar in size. And then I copied that off to the side and used it as sort of a guide to know how big sort of like these stalls that I should be making to go inside of each of these little shopping areas should be. So I made like 5 or 6 different little types of stalls. Like some of them they're selling, I don't know, maybe like fruits. Some of them they're maybe like little restaurants or something. Some of them sell, I don't know, like clothes or whatever it is. And so I made like 5 or 6 different little ones and took the whole entire stall, all of those little pieces that make up the stall, and copied it kind of randomly throughout this shopping arcade. And so I did that with all 5 or 6 of them to fill up the whole shopping arcade with some variety and some randomness. And once I was done with this, you know, there was really a lot of work that went into it, and I was looking at it from up above, and I was noticing that you can't see any of it. It's a complete waste. And so what I decided to do was delete half of the shopping arcade props so you could really see into this area still. And rather than having a roof over it, what I did was I took some kind of like Chinese lanterns and placed them going from one side to the other side of this walkway. So the whole walkway has like Chinese lanterns going over the top of it the whole way down, which was a pretty unique little touch, I think. These conveyor belts that go down this street need to be obviously supported by something, and now this shopping arcade is directly underneath all of it, so I can't just have like pillars underneath. And so what I did was I created kind of like a custom pillar using a bunch of different Ronix 6.9 expressway pillars to make like a really wide support that had, you know, a lower support for the lower conveyor belts and an upper support for the upper conveyor belts. And I placed those down kind of throughout, evenly spaced, and put some pipes going in between each of those pillars, just because I'm sort of thinking that this really big wide street is somewhat of like a services corridor a little bit, where like maybe sewage or water or electricity or cables or internet or that kind of stuff kind of goes through this street. And so going along with that idea, up above, like way higher up, I put a lot of wires crisscrossing back and forth from one side to the other side of the street, and put some pipes at random places, sort of on lower parts of it, going back and forth in different directions. And in one spot, I had this building that was made up of a bunch of different smaller buildings to make sort of like one larger one. And I used this concrete piece in order to make sort of like balconies on different levels of this, going up higher and higher. And the top balcony I made pretty large, actually. And on that balcony, I put down some walls around sort of like an off limits area. And inside of that, I put down like a sort of maybe like a radio tower. I don't know if that would be the actual function on Mars, a radio tower, but that's what the asset is. And some other little kind of like mechanical looking pieces. And for the rest of this building, I did some other fun stuff. I put some graffiti around this wall that kind of blocks people from getting into this more private, radio area. I put some stuff on each of the balconies, some like tables and chairs and trash and different little things. I continued along that same sort of thought process with the Chinese lanterns down below. So I put a bunch of those lanterns on the sides of this building as like decoration. And the other cool thing that I did was I used more of those capsule apartment props that I've just continued using over and over. and I made them kind of like stick out from this building in a funny way where they're almost like little pod apartments, like dangling out over this street. In my mind, when I was doing it, I was sort of thinking of those like little like hotels in Japan where you go and like sleep in a tube, you know, and you have very, very little space. And so that's kind of what I was thinking with this place, is maybe it's some sort of hotel or like temporary housing, you know. And I actually just only thought of this now that I'm doing the commentary, but you know, this is a very central part of the city. Maybe it's the kind of place where when you first come to the city, before you have your housing accommodations, like your permanent housing sorted out, you come stay here for a week or two while you get situated, you know. So maybe that's the idea for this place. I don't know. So, for the first time ever in Mars, we have a guest builder. I gave him some general ideas of things that maybe could be built in the city, one of which was building a residential area around sort of the edge of the crater. So I'd like to welcome one of the legends of City Skylines YouTube, a complete master of PO, Skibitth.
Hey man, hello everyone. Glad to be here on Mars. I was actually hoping at a point to be on Mars, and here I am. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm super glad to have you here. This is very exciting for me. You do an amazing build. So tell us about it. What was the first thing that you did here?
Well, the first thing after we talked about the exact location, I had to think of how to link it with your own tower you had there. First thing I had to do it was to think of how to make the bridge.
You did a pretty crazy thing with that, right? Like there's some sort of crazy multiple assets going on.
Yeah, well, not that many, but I had to add the ploppable pavement made by Ronix doesn't have the bottom side, so from down you can see through it. In order to avoid that, I had to add some extra concrete.
Yes, classic Mars issue. That's something I deal with constantly.
Yeah. But yeah, I went for a simple bridge. At that point was kind of too simple. I wanted to think of something else, and I found this beautiful bridge made by Ronix as well. Not bridge, it's
yeah, it's some sort of like, I think it's from Saudi Arabia or something like that. It's so
yes, I think so too.
So what's on top? What are these wires coming off of it?
Well, actually, it's another bridge. It's just a concrete big pillar holding some wires. That's all. And first, I tried to link that with my bridges. And I was like, it's not working, it's not looking good. Let me plop something else. And I found this tower, and then, with the help of procedural objects, I managed to hide that bridge into this tower. And then manually, I moved all those little cables to make them fit perfectly on the bridge itself, and then also on the tower.
Oh my god.
It was cool. It's not the first time I've done this, but definitely was really cool. And of course, procedural objects give you the chance to do anything. After I saw the tower itself, I was like, hey, this tower it needs something extra. I was looking for a building on a workshop, and I plopped it, of course, with procedural object. I shrinked it down, and I plopped it on top of it. We can say it's a big restaurant. I thought that's what I felt. Hey, I need something on top of that tower there, and
yeah, man, it's so cool and so detailed about these wires. Now that you've done this, I'm definitely about to do a lot more bridge stuff in the city, kind of build off of that idea. So what's next?
After that, well, of course, I started with, I want to say, big platform where all the buildings will be held. And I wanted also, I delimited a little bit the area where, so you are coming from the bridge, and then you have to go through the tower itself, and then you have like 3 more areas where you can go left, right, and in front. And this big platform is made with concrete, and I found some cool stuff on the workshop made by Decha, some nice things that can be used in any park. So I took those concrete combined with some grass looking thing, or if it's not grass, it's green, I don't know. But we can think is marble.
Some sort of green tile maybe, or something like that.
Something. And I sunk those into the ground, and I make some shapes, because I didn't want to leave the concrete all alone like that. concrete looks like too concrete at a point.
Yeah, it starts to look very plain, you know. I've
Yeah.
been suffering from that myself in some of these upper areas.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, I need to make some stuff over this concrete. But the funny thing is, while I was doing this build, I saw that someone released some beautiful waterfalls. They are props, nothing else. They look like they are actually falling, you know. So I came up, I came up with a crazy idea on how to make a small fountain. I was like, hey, what should I combine to make this fountain? So I found some things made by Amipolite. It's the base of a fountain, which was empty, completely empty. I added in the middle a pillar. Well, it was a column. I needed something up there from where the water is falling down. That's what I came up with. So yeah, these are the things that I wanted to add. I will add all over the places to make it look like more luxurious area. So after I tackle that, I had to start adding the first buildings. Before I do this, I had to look on the workshop, of course, to find some, let's say, luxurious buildings. And I found some of them. Also, some of them are looking pretty futuristic, if you ask me. And I started plopping down, of course, all of them will be procedural objects. So they are not actually functioning. But of course, we will do the tricks in order to make them function by plopping down some service cubes inside of them. They are procedural objects, so I can cut some of the walls in case they are in my way, or to modify them, or maybe in some cases rescale them.
Yeah, they all fit together so well. It's amazing.
Yeah. At a point, I was like, okay, I will have to make more levels for these. How should I separate them? I thought like, okay, maybe I can make another concrete platform, let's call it, where people can actually walk. So I had to make this extra level in between the houses. I added a balustrade. I saw you have these balustrades from Monaco.
Yes, they're great.
And yeah, plop them as balconies, as barriers. Well, hopefully I made it safe for people. They will not fall from there.
You also use some of this Avanya fence here, I see.
Yes, in other cases on the left side, I use these fences made by Avanya because I made these look like it's like big apartments or something. And on top of those so-called apartments, I made a relaxing area with the pool. I think you had it. And I was, okay, I have to use this somewhere. It's luxurious. There are some also chairs, beds, and tents. And I said, okay, let's use it on top of the apartment area there. In case there is a leak, someone will get it in his apartment. But I wanted to have it there. I wanted to have something, a relaxing area up there. Okay, after I plopped down lots of buildings, lots of houses, I was like, okay, should people have here like a little shopping area probably? And I found another building that could it's also very futuristic and fancy.
I love the way that the curves, there's so many curves and so many straight lines in this build. It's a lot of like contrasting shapes sort of, you know. It's a very cool look, I think.
Yeah, I've tried to I didn't want to make it simple. I needed and I wanted to have more curves. And to be honest with you, I tried to have a big picture in my imagination, in my mind, on how this should look like. And of course it doesn't look like anything like that, but I went up with these curvy areas. It's a combination. And the last things I had to add was the rocks all over the places. So I saw you were using them on the other side of this dome. Some of them, I mean most of them are procedural objects, and some of them are being shrunk down, some of them are being, I made them bigger to make different type of shapes and looks. I don't think I copied too many of them, just like one by one and one by one. And the last thing I've done was to plop down some trees in the missing places, some poppable grass and the lights.
Yeah, and it looks great. You did a great job with the lights. After you were done with your build and we exchanged back our save games because I had Little France at the same time, I opened it up for the first time and like half of the buildings in the city were gone. It must have been something to do with Rico, and I was very scared for a minute, and then I remembered that both Move It and procedural objects have functions where you can import huge sets of assets like all together. So I started off with a Move It export. I just took all of the buildings, nodes, plants, trees, that kind of stuff, props, and made an export of that, and then selected everything with procedural objects afterwards and made a separate export for that. And when I brought it in, it was a little bit difficult to line everything up. And once I did that, I actually started looking at like how this was functioning. And Skib, you subscribed to some really awesome game-changing assets for me that I have never even seen before, the block services assets, which I cannot thank you enough for getting these things, because it's completely changed the way I build, basically.
Yes, someone released them on the workshop and I'm using them as well, and they are super indeed game changer.
Definitely. So the first thing I did was connected up a pair of roads that go in and out of this main building, and it was really hard to like see what I was going to do. So procedural objects also has this awesome feature where you can select like a ton of procedural objects at once and turn them all into a layer and then hide that layer temporarily. So I was basically able to make this entire build invisible and run a road around the whole entire thing underneath, so that any of these block services that I placed down would still have road access. So that was the next thing I did, was just place down a ton of block services, a lot of residential, a couple commercial here and there. I think I did put commercial in that shopping area that you were talking about earlier up at the top. And last thing was just turning that whole layer of procedural objects back on and running some extra pedestrian paths to make sure that I had pedestrian coverage to all of those block services that I placed down. So now there's like maybe 4,000 people that live here. It's super vibrant.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there's quite a few people who walk in and out of here.
Man, I'm so glad you've managed to import stuff. If you wouldn't told me that about this, I didn't know.
So Skib, thank you for doing this, for building in Mars. This has been an amazing build that you did. It turned out so much better than I could have possibly imagined. When I was originally asking if you wanted to build a residential area out here, I had something slightly different in mind, and what you built far exceeded what was in my head. So thank you for doing this, Skib. I'm going to continue using this style over and over, I think, with this sort of very nice, luxurious, modern, dense residential out here. It's very cool. Did some very cool techniques. You gave me the block services assets, which I wouldn't have known about otherwise, and I'm just gonna use like crazy from now on. So I can't thank you enough, Skib.
Thanks for having me here, man. It was a really pleasure to build on Mars. It was like a little dream of mine, saying, man, and that Mars project is one of the best series out there on YouTube. Would be really cool to
Thanks, man.
to get a chance of, or just thinking of maybe would I ever do it. So thanks for that, man. It was pleasure, and anytime I would get back there, I would take a ship and get back to Mars, a rocket, whatever it needed.
Well, I would love to have you back, man. Someone in the comments of one of the videos mentioned that you can change the speed limit for pedestrian sidewalks and pedestrian paths. What that means is we can, for instance, lower the speed limit of the sidewalks on all the conveyor belts and make it like impossibly slow for citizens to get anywhere that way, so they would prefer to go a different direction. Or like for pedestrian paths, lowering the speed limit on that in order to make public transportation a little bit more desirable, because right now I have no one taking any public transportation, and I think that's why, is because citizens find the public transportation to be a longer route because it's so easy for them to get anywhere they want to on pedestrian paths at ground level right now. So I'm here in the asset editor, and let's try this. So we're going to start here with the invisible conveyor belt road, the one with sidewalks, and we're going to load this up. And let's just look at these lanes. So we have a vehicle lane and a pedestrian lane, right? And if we click this, yeah, would you look at that? Speed limit, 0.25. So let's just play around with changing this to like 0.05, real slow. And we'll do this in the elevated version as well, 0.05. And let's test this to see if it even does anything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make two little areas, one like that, and then another one down here, very similar. And then I'm gonna take this one that I've called test, that we're testing. This is the one with the slow sidewalks, and have him be the road that comes in. And then this one, which is the original one with the fast sidewalks, we'll have this one exit the city. So just get some services, get this going as a functioning city real quick. So just something like that, real basic. Hopefully we'll be able to tell which of these paths has a lot more citizens walking on it, because like it's kind of symmetrical here, and there'd be ideally an equal number of citizens going on each one. And if one of these paths has like way more citizens walking on it on the sidewalk, then we kind of know, okay, yeah, that speed limit thing really did do something here. Wow, so look at this. Every single person is walking on the right side here, which means that they're only going on the left side here if they need to get to these particular buildings. Everyone who wants to walk like between sections of the city is walking on this right path. So we've effectively tricked the pathfinding into forcing every single citizen to walk just a little bit further to go over here. And I think what we're gonna do next here is make some pedestrian paths that have a little bit of varying speed limits as well, to try and force citizens to go certain directions, or in our case probably force them to take the public transportation more often. So what we're going to do to make the invisible pedestrian paths is load an asset in the asset editor, and it's going to be this Eco invisible pedestrian path, which is kind of like the standard invisible pedestrian path. There's a couple, but this is the one that I like the most because it's got different options of widths. So let's start here with the regular width one, and we'll take a look at the lanes. And this speed limit, oh, look at that. So the speed limit is 0.4, which if we remember the sidewalk, that was 0.25, which is a definitive answer. Yes, pedestrian paths are faster than sidewalks. In game, I'm just going to continue using the regular ones in areas where I don't care about speed or forcing citizens to do something. So this is going to be like an alternate version where the speed is set to like 0.2, which is half as fast as the original one. And we'll do that for elevated and all the other types as well. Okay, so we got kind of like the same city going here, and what I'm gonna do this time is I'm gonna use the no sidewalk road to connect everything here, and then running next to this, I'm gonna do those new pedestrian paths, and we're gonna do two different types. We're gonna do on one side, let's do the 8-meter one that I just made, the slow path, and then on the other side, we'll do the 8-meter fast path, and we'll see how much of a difference this makes. Wow, yeah, so look, everyone is taking the fast path on the left, the original one, and no one is taking these new slow paths on the right, which means that I can use these slow paths strategically in different parts of Mars in order to make that journey feel longer and hopefully trick citizens into using the public transportation more, because that will hopefully be like a shortcut for them. That'll be the faster route as opposed to taking a very slow pedestrian path. So let's hop in game and give that a try. So we're here in game, and because I updated the roads with the new slow sidewalks, I don't have to do anything about that. It's already completely updated. The asset just got replaced, basically. But the slow paths that I created are new assets, so I'm gonna have to go through and do a lot of replacing paths right now in order to see if this even works. Because right now, if we look over here on the left, not a single person is taking the public transportation. And I'm not expecting like a ton of people to be taking it because the city is still so small, but hopefully we can get more than 0 people, you know? And as the city grows, maybe even more than that. So my thinking is that I'm just going to start replacing pedestrian paths in areas where citizens might be trying to take like a long walk to get from point A to point B, and leaving the original fast paths in areas that connect you like to a public transportation area, so that hopefully it's pretty desirable to get to public transportation and take that as opposed to walking far distances. So right off the bat, I know that this path here along the side of the central sorting exchange is a big one that a lot of people walk on. So let's just update all this with slow paths. Really just anywhere that I see like a ton of people walking is somewhere that I'm going to be replacing with the slow paths, because that just gives me an indication that this is like a fast route for people. People are walking this way, and hopefully if I do enough of these, then people will start to prefer the public transportation. Hopefully. It's doubtful, but maybe. Well, immediately I can see way less people are walking here, so I wonder where they're all going. Okay, I see more people going this route here, so this is kind of just diverting people as of now. I might just have to go and try and replace as many of these as I possibly can so that it's not diverting people to other pedestrian paths. It's more just taking people off the pedestrian paths and putting them on public transportation. So at this point I've gotten most of the paths replaced, I think, as far as I can tell, and not a lot that's changed, but maybe let's just let the time lapse play for a while, let the simulation run and see if there's a difference. Wow, look at that, 5 per week now on the cable cars. Big numbers. 8 per week, oh my god, it's jumping. 10 per week, this is a milestone. And a coincidence, because it's episode 10. Still no one on the helicopters though. So previously I had been trying to make citizens walk like on around all of these different levels here, and so I had a path that went like up the escalator and then around the second level and then up the second escalator over here on the left, and I just connected those. So now there's a path that can go straight up one escalator, straight up the next escalator, and get you over here. So hopefully that's an even quicker route to get to this helicopter pad here. So I think in general the slower sidewalks on the sides of these conveyor belt roads are doing a pretty good job at keeping people off of the conveyor belts, but we're still looking here at only 25 people on the cable car and still no one on the helicopter. And the reason that there might not be anyone on the helicopter is just because I only have a couple stops that really function, just this one here and this one. The one over here isn't, I'm not 100% sure if it's actually linked up by pedestrian path, so I don't know how much that's really helping. And maybe these two are just too close together for people to ever really think that they want to take that route. So I'm just going to try placing down like 1 or 2 more helicopter stops real quick and see if having ones on like further parts of the city will make a difference at all. So Skib.
Yes.
Well, okay, so I'm thinking that in order to maybe get a test of trying to get a helicopter stop like just further away from the rest of the city, maybe we add one to your build over here real quick, at least just like get a functioning one going to see if the functionality of these helicopters, we can get some people on them. Do you have any ideas of where we maybe could put a helicopter stop out here?
I would start on top of that restaurant tower.
Up here?
Yeah, I think that one would be a cool place, a cool spot.
It might be tricky because this blimp stop has like a pole sticking out the bottom. Let's see if we can do it. Okay, so let's place this down, move it in.
I see something is raising there in the sky.
Yeah, so this is the actual piece that is the blimp stop that the blimp's like attached to. So I'm thinking hopefully we can hide this in one of the supports, you know? Let's get a pedestrian path going up here real quick and let's connect it up. Oh yeah, so here's a guy
someone
coming.
Is coming. Yes, it's landing on a
little bit off to the side. Let's just speed up time real quick and maybe there's definitely no way that someone's gonna take this stupid helicopter. I've been trying so hard to get people to take the helicopters.
I think it's has something to do, first of all, with the game artificial intelligence first, because some people keep walking. I have the same thing in Little France. People actually, I was looking at some of them, and they actually crossing a big part of the city by walking.
Yeah, this thing where I've slowed down all the speed limits for the sidewalks and for the pedestrian paths, and it actually has gotten me from 0 people taking the cable cars to now like 20, 15, 30, somewhere in that range, and still no one is taking these public transportation helicopters. So this might be an ongoing project, trying to figure out how to get people to take this, but for the time being, I think that we at least have an answer for the cable cars. And half of this, 2/3 of this experiment was successful. The sidewalks being slowed down was successful. The slow paths in order to get some people going on the cable cars was successful. But I don't know about these helicopters. I guess I'm gonna have to keep playing around But that's it for this episode. Thank you again, Skib, for being here and for doing this build and for allowing me into Little France. It's been an awesome experience.
Thank you as well, man, and it was really a cool exchange of experience, I want to say. Yeah, really good one.
Definitely. So that's it for this episode, and I'll see you all next time on Mars.